Hey, everybody. It's good that you've joined us for this chat. I've got my good friend, Martin Purnell, all the way from Northern Ireland with us. And today he's going to discuss his podcast called Off Grid Christianity. And we're going to sit here and find out what it's all about, why he started it, where it's going to go in the future, and a little bit about who Martin is as a person. So, Martin, welcome to the podcast. Good to see you.
Thank you very much indeed, Randy. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you very much for asking me.
Great. Well, let's jump right into it. Now, the goal here today is to find out why, Martin, you started the podcast Off Grid Christianity. Such an interesting name. However, we want to first talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear a brief testimony of how you came to faith in Christ. Of course, that's the foundation of your Christianity, your spirituality. And I just want to have the listeners hear, how did you come to Christ?
Very quickly, well, I always believed in God. I can remember as like a 4 or 5-year-old learning at school, in primary school in the 60s, Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, the hymn, which I loved. My mum was telling me off in the car because I was singing it. But I just loved that. And that's always been my number one hymn. And so eventually I would go to Sunday school, like most people would in those days, go to church. I always believed in Jesus, always believed in God, never put both together. And then moved down to my parents' hometown of Bristol. It's a city, really. Well, it is a city. Yeah, my life was in a bit of a mess, really. Nothing to do with me as such. My parents were getting divorced as soon as we moved down to Bristol. Mm-hmm. So that was a major thing, and work. And I was very naive, very immature, 16-year-old, didn't know what to do. You turn then to music and to football, which is what I did. But I kept feeling this call back, going back to church. And so I did, and went to the local Methodist church, became a Sunday school teacher within 3 weeks because they were looking for somebody. Even though I wasn't a Christian, I was doing that. And then I suppose about 3 or 4 years later, having tried to search a bit more, basically I fancied a girl and thought, well, the best way to fancy even more is to go to her church because she was a Christian and would have these conversations. I'd met her through work. So I went to her church, met her brother. Her brother was just as like me, a Bristol City fan. So we go to the games together and I'll spend all hours talking to her parents about stuff. And I say this all the time, and people go, well, why'd you use the word reluctantly? Because I did. In 1987, in February, I sat on the staircase and realized that I just had to ask Jesus into my life. So I did. Mm-hmm. And it was reluctantly, really, because it's like, all right, I give up God. I can't argue anymore. C.S. Lewis, he said the same sort of thing. He was the most reluctant Christian of all time, I think he said, when he asked Jesus into his life. And I get that. Mm-hmm. I really do get that. And like C.S. Lewis, there were no fireworks, no amazing flashing lights or anything. And I phoned up the girl's mother, and I said, I've just become a Christian. And her immortal words back to me were, oh, that's nice, dear. And that was it.
Yeah, I love that word reluctantly because, again, you're stepping into a brand new lifestyle. You're stepping into a brand new field. You've never really read the Bible before through. And so you come in kind of going, well, it seems as if this is a good decision I'm making. I believe in God. I believe in his son, Jesus, but I'm not really convinced whether this is right for me or not. And so there are people that jump in full with both feet. They jump right into the pond. Other people, they dip their toes in, and that's okay. Everybody's journey is different. A lot of times the people that jump in with both feet sometimes get out faster than the person who dipped their toes in and just waded into the water. And so how somebody comes to Christ is by means no reflection of how they will end their journey with Christ. So that's a really interesting story, a really interesting testimony that you have.
Yeah, thank you. I can go on a bit further about the water bit there because I used to say years ago, in fact, I haven't mentioned this for several years to anybody, but it's like once you're in the swimming pool, having sort of put your toe in the water, and quite often we just want people to push us in. That's the issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
We don't want to jump in. We want people to push us in, knowing that we really want to be in there, but we're just scared. And of course, when you're in there and you're like chest high, it's like, great, you're in the water and you're enjoying it, but you're in the shallow end. And basically what God is saying is, look, come into the deep end. I'll look after you. Mm-hmm. And you go, but I don't want to. And you want to swim out, and then you feel that your feet are no longer touching the bottom, and it's like, oh, what do I do? I then swim back. Mm-hmm. And really what God wants you to do is to trust him completely and swim out into the deep and be there.
Right.
And that is hard.
That's life. Life is scary.
Yeah.
Life will give you punches. It will give you curveballs. And, the training wheels went off on your bicycle when you were 3 years old. They're not coming back on. And so there's a lot of things that we have to figure out And I just go, okay, God, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to get there. I don't know how you're going to fix this situation I'm going through. However, I'm going to trust you, even though I'm treading water. I feel like I'm going to drown, but I'm going to trust you. So yeah, I can relate extremely well, especially the last few years of having nothing to hold on to, not having a life preserver, and yet trusting God that you're in the middle of the ocean and that something's going to show up, that the island's going to be there, a miracle is going to happen. And just when you think that all is lost, God comes through, and he's never failed me that way.
Yes.
So yeah. Well, let's jump into off-grid Christianity. And we're going to jump into this podcast, and we're going to learn a little bit about it and learn a little bit about you while we're doing it. So what inspired you to start this podcast called Off-Grid Christianity?
Well, the backstory behind it, I have to give you a very brief backstory before doing Off-Grid Christianity. My work life, basically, for the last 10 years before going into radio, more about that in a second, I was a training officer, train people how to sell properly, how to give best advice properly, more like, how to present properly, how to interview properly, how to listen properly, all the skills that are needed so that you can really be the best. At the time, I didn't realize that that was a really good training ground for me. Obviously, I really appreciate it now. But ever since I was like 3 or 4 years of age, all I ever wanted to be was a radio presenter, because that's what I ever wanted to do. And I achieved it mainly because I knew that that's what God wanted me to do. God spoke to me in an audible voice in 1994. It's the only time he ever did, telling me that he wanted me to apply for redundancy. And it's like, hang on a minute, God, you brought me into training and everything else like that. It's been great. And now you want me to give it up. So I did. That's a long story. Eventually, I ended up in radio because I knew that's where God was asking me to go. So I went to UCB, which at the time was one of only 2 Christian radio stations in the whole of the UK. That's another long story for some other time. And then I moved into Cross Rhythms, where we wanted to play Christian contemporary music, really. That was my bag. That's what I wanted to do. So we were the first in the UK to have an official FM license given to us, full-time license. And we would be broadcasting on a fledgling internet service as well, which we had quite a lot of listeners by this time listening to us in America, where you had at that time 1,600 Christian radio stations. So for people to find us, it was quite something. There, I met my wife from Northern Ireland, and we then got married. And as soon as we got married, this is where Alison's health just plummeted. By this time, she was going through ME. It's called something else in America now, isn't it? I've forgotten what it is called now. And then she became registered blind. And then, amazingly, our son was born despite everything like that. And no sooner had our son been born, Alison, who used to be a staff nurse before I met her, so she knew a lot more about her own body than most doctors would do, especially from a medical background. She knew there was something wrong with her, so she went to the GP. GP said, well, there's nothing I can do. She demanded a second opinion. The GP acquiesced, and she went off to see a specialist. And it's just what they did, because they caught her with having thyroid cancer.
Oh, wow.
But it was in the early stages, so they were able to rip the thing out. The problem was that we had, by this time, an 18-month-old baby boy, and, he wants to bond with his mother.
Right.
And his mother is in a radioactive room. She can't see for 3 weeks, can't touch for 6 months, a little baby boy. I knew that I had to do something. Just got from bad to worse, really, because it was poor little Sam. It was like the friends by this time I had in Stoke who were absolutely amazing. They wanted to help out and look after Sam, who was just such a delightful little boy. Well, he's no longer a delightful little boy, he's a delightful young man.
He is.
They wanted to help out there, but it was just becoming so stressful. So I had to make the decision, and it was an easy one, really, but a really difficult, bit like Jonah, and that was had to give up work. And I thought I'd be going back after 6 months, hoping that Alison by this time was okay. And unfortunately, one illness has led to another, and being registered blind now, I've been her full-time carer ever since that time. We then moved to Northern Ireland, to Alison's home country. This is where she's from. And that's been interesting, to say the least, in more ways than one. Shortly before COVID, I've always kept my relationship really well with one of the people from Cross Rhythms. He was a program manager there and a station manager, basically, if not in name. And he then, by this time, decided to go and form his own radio station. And so we would meet up once a month. And then just before COVID broke, he said, look, we've been talking about this for years. Why don't you do a radio show for me? I bought off him a decent microphone. And of course, when COVID then broke, our son by this time was at university studying music composition. He's a fully qualified saxophonist. he needed obviously a microphone to record so he could qualify, and send it off to the tutors, because everything by this time with COVID was done from basically home.
Mhm.
So we had the microphone. And then as soon as COVID finished, I was just praying one day and I really felt God saying, right, now's the time to do podcasts. And I just said, well, what would you call it? And all of a sudden my brain came 3 words: off-grid Christianity.
Wow.
That's how it came about.
So there isn't a truly deep story behind the name Off-Grid Christianity other than it just popped into your mind.
It just popped in my mind, and then made sense as well, because I think that's what I am in a lot of ways, and quite a lot of people are as well.
Mhm.
Really, you can be a Christian, but you can be off grid as well. And I think that term is normally used more in America. When you want to go off grid,
Mhm. That is true.
it just made so much sense.
It does make sense because there are Christians out there who go to church. There are Christians who don't go to church, and everybody has their reasons. When I was a pastor, obviously having good attendance on a Sunday morning was important. It was nice to be able to tell the people that we're running X amount of people and not lie about it. Really, it was nice to see people show up at church. But I kept on running into people who said that they didn't go to church, or they reluctantly came to church, even my church, because of some really bad past experiences that they had.
Yeah.
At the time, I was a young pastor. I didn't understand that. And what I realized that even as a young pastor in my 30s, I haven't experienced a lot of life yet. And a lot of my sermons and a lot of the things that I believed they were good things, but they were theories. Theoretically, 1 + 1 should make 2. Theoretically, if you do this, God will do that. Theoretically, if you are going through marriage issues, well, you just need to pray more. You just need to fast a little bit more. You just need to have the elder, bishop, whoever come and lay hands on you, and everything will be fixed. And at 55 years old, I know that that's not always the case. I do understand people's issues. I do understand people's struggles, especially if they've gotten hurt in church, which happens a lot. And you realize that the church simply is just made up of a bunch of people. And unfortunately, people do hurt people.
Oh, yes.
And that's been the case for eternity.
Exactly.
But so we got the gist behind Off-Grid Christianity. It isn't a session where you just gripe and complain about the church.
Not at all.
But truly, from what I've heard, the interviews that I've heard, it gives you a different perspective on people's lives and their journeys, because everybody has had a different journey in their life. And so bringing that up about journeys, what have been some of your most memorable and impactful interviews? How many episodes? Over 100.
135, 136, something like that.
136.
Coming up to the 150th one, which should be around about December. So I've got plans for that to make it a special podcast. I've got
Oh, that's beautiful.
2 people lined up for that as well.
Most memorable interviews during that 137 episode run.
I can honestly say every single episode that I've released, they have really contributed at least 1 or maybe 2 or even more golden nuggets per episode.
Okay.
Like you say, they're all different. So there's always something good about each podcast. But what I've done is I've given my thoughts on to who I would choose to be in my top 10. I can go through them if you want and explain why I choose each person as to why they're special to me. And hopefully it will resonate with those people listening today. They might want to check them out as well.
Go ahead.
The first one is episode 7, Noel Richards.
Mm-hmm.
In the 1990s, late 80s, I don't know who would be your big praise and worship star from America in those days, but in the UK, it was Noel Richards. And he did a thing in Wembley Stadium in 1997 called Champion of the World. Thousands upon thousands of Christians came and he put on an amazing event. I contacted him saying, look, I've started this podcast. It'd be great if you could be a guest. And he sent back an email almost straight away saying, well, actually, I'm in Hungary at the moment. I'm doing this big event here, but I would love to do it. Contact me next week and we'll arrange it. And so I did. And ever since then, I'd love to call him a friend because he has been so helpful to me. It's like, if you know somebody who's supposed to be really at the top of their game, why is he talking to me? But he will help me out. So every Christmas, we do a special Christmas podcast, which is supposed to be funny, together with Martin Scott, another well-known evangelist from the UK, who worked with Noel throughout the 70s and 80s. And yet they're prepared to come in and be with me. My little calling card, it was suggested maybe I should get them so if I ever meet someone, I could, well, here you are, here's that.
Right.
That was designed by Noel Richards. He just sent it over to me. I've learned a lot about that, yeah, you might be at top of your game, but you don't have to have an ego about it. That's what I like.
So you're number 2 guy or person.
Brian Houston, who's from Northern Ireland, he was like the praise and worship leader, but trying to go down the CCM, contemporary Christian music route, in the late 1990s. And he's still very well thought of over here in Northern Ireland, and did quite well in America, together with Noel Richards and Wayne Drain when they formed the Hudson Taylors. That was a band that they did. Brian Houston, he just went off on one. I asked him what he meant by the word grace, and he just went off on one. Incredible.
And this Brian Houston is not the Brian Houston from Hillsongs.
No, definitely not. This is Brian Houston from Belfast, Northern Ireland.
Got you. Yeah, just to make that clear for our listeners.
Yes, definitely not.
So you're number 3 person.
He's from America.
Okay.
Wayne Jacobson. He basically helped write The Shack. Every so often you'll get a book that everyone as a Christian has to read. And in the 1990s, noughties, it was The Shack. I contacted him. He explained what he did behind the scenes for the book.
Okay.
But it was more than that, because he was being open and honest, and he was talking about how he'd come back from doing a major Christian event somewhere
Okay.
to walk in to find there was a letter on the table and his wife had left him. His wife, who'd been a Christian with him throughout their journey, had left him. So he then explained about how she had been given false information by her therapist.
Yeah.
Awful, awful story. We've had him back as a returning guest as well. He does phenomenal podcasts himself. Yeah, brilliant. That was episode 30.
Since 2020, divorce rate has gone, what I believe is through the roof. Interestingly enough, the ability of people to get online or on social media and to now use words like you're a narcissist, you're this, you're that, you're the other. Learning about, these real psychological issues on social media. It's almost like if I read a book, because we love to golf. If I read a book on golfing and thought, man, I read that book, I'm going to go out tomorrow and shoot 3 under on a really good golf course. And you realize that you really don't know that much about golfing just because you read a book. It's a lot more difficult, and people tend to want to diagnose other people. Well, this person's a narcissist, and this person's this, and this person's that. And it's really gotten into the psyche of the modern person. I can get a divorce from this person. I can stop this relationship because of the fact that I read something on Facebook or whatever like that. I've got a lot of friends on Facebook. I'm involved in archery full time. And
a national champion.
Not about me today. It's about you. I'm watching a lot of people that I know their marriage is failing. And when you talk to them, it comes in to where, whoa, this sounds really familiar. What that person's gone through, or even the people who are listening to this podcast, knowing that you're not alone, knowing that there are people out there that understand what you're going through, and God understands what you're going through. I know in my situation, you've got to keep faith. You've got to keep your eyes on God, even though you can't see the beginning from the end, that He will find a way. If you want to go to that podcast where Wayne Jacobson is talking about that, it's really inspiring. It inspired me to know that I'm not alone and that God will always make a way. Just stay faithful. That's all. Don't do stupid things. Stay faithful.
And there is a happy ending to that story as well, which is great. But I'm not going to say what it is because I want people to go and listen to the episode.
Absolutely. So your 4th guy.
This was probably the most challenging podcast. What happened afterwards? Episode 41, Andy Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
Andy Robinson was a Baptist minister, still is a Baptist minister. The reason why I choose this is because I lost, when I used to look at the stats every week to see how many people around the world were listening. Once this episode went out, I lost over 40% of my audience straight away.
Okay.
The reason being is that Andy got into the pulpit one day in his Baptist church in Oxford and thanked all the little old ladies, sort of they are praying for him that he'd bring a wife. He said, but the respective elders know about this, but I'm now showing you that I'm same-sex attracted. And He then said, but I also know it's my belief, having obviously been a Baptist minister, gone to theological college, so he would know more about it than I would on so many subjects. He said, but I believe that marriage is, as far as the Bible's concerned, between a man and a wife. And because I'm same-sex attracted, if it means I don't get married, then I don't get married because of that. And I thought, wow, that's brilliant. What he then talked about was how he set up an organisation with other ministers who are same-sex attracted. and how they can help those people that are of a similar mind, maybe in ministry or certainly outside ministry. And they brought out a thing called livingout.org.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter what your thoughts are on this. It's the fact that actually he was prepared to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then what really, really gets my blood boiling about this episode is that after about half an hour, I said to him, "You must get fed up, Andy, going all around the country talking about this. Let's change the subject." And he said, "Well, what do you want to talk about?" I said, "Well, what's on your mind at the moment?" He said, funny enough, we started talking about Jonah. And like the last 20 to 25 minutes was all about his life, but from a different perspective and bringing in Jonah from the Bible.
Okay.
It was absolutely brilliant. I just had this feeling subsequently by looking at the stats that there are Christians out there who would go around with a checklist and say, "I need to find a podcast. Right, this is what I believe in." And eventually you would stumble across off-grid Christianity and listen to this. "Oh, this is good. He believes in that. Tick. I believe in this. Tick. I believe in that. Tick." Going all the way down. "Oh, wait a minute. This Andy Robinson bloke. Oh, can't have that." Right, I'm no longer listening to him.
Yeah.
Maybe it's too simplistic an answer, but that's what happened. And that's what I believe happened because I dared to put him out. It's such a phenomenal podcast, episode 41. Whatever your views are on it, have a listen to what he says. Brilliant.
Yeah, because truly, Christianity, as we are going through this together, should be a safe place for us to talk about what we're struggling with, what we're doing,
Yes.
what we're thinking about, what we believe, what we don't believe. Again, we have how many different branches of Baptists, we have how many different branches of Presbyterians and Methodists and Pentecostals, but for us to think that I have the answers and everybody needs to think just like I think is very, very, very arrogant to think that way. I've got friends who are gay, love them to death, would do anything for them. They would do anything for me. A lot of people would help themselves if they would take time to get to know somebody, regardless of whether they agree with them or not. Get to know them. Get to spend time with them. Get to love that person. And you'll hear their story and you'll see them differently. Yeah, pray for them. You don't have to agree with where they're at. You don't have to agree with what they're saying. In America now, it's Republicans versus Democrats. Mm-hmm. And if you go to social media, oh my goodness, if you're a Republican, you're a Democrat, unfriend me now. I don't want to listen to you. I don't want to talk to you. And that's the worst thing that we could do is just sit here divided on issues. When we get to heaven, is God going to, well, you know what? I'm not going to let you in because you voted for such and such a person. I'm not going to let you into heaven because you were attracted to a same-sex person. I think we limit God. I think we put God in a box. You can only do what I interpret you of doing. And that's very, very, very arrogant to do. And so, yeah, I know that would be a challenging interview. I know that would cause some issues. However, I applaud you for going through with it. I applaud you for letting him share his testimony, share his truth. People don't have to like it. That's fine. But there are people out there, no doubt they were blessed by what they heard. And you facilitated that, Martin.
I hope so. And he had something to share. And it was a phenomenal podcast. I'd have Andy back again any day.
Nice. All right, your next guy or person.
Jeannie Kendall. She wrote a book. Yeah, we struck up a friendship, which was really good. As a result of her podcast, we then did a few weeks later, episode 59, which because she was a theologian, she was a lecturer, we did a whole topic called Jesus and the Women in the Gospels. What does it actually mean about being a woman in the Gospels? Who were they? In particular, I wanted to fly the flag for Mary Magdalene. All this stuff about her being a prostitute and stuff like that. Nah, there's no basis of it whatsoever. So I wanted to find out more. And that podcast really, really was popular with all the feedback we got. And then subsequently, we did another one a few episodes later, another special about Paul. What did Paul actually say about women and why has he been so misunderstood? And the fact that it was Jeannie sharing it, a woman, absolutely brilliant. The basic thing is, you have to put down your prejudices and let's look at the facts, look at the context that everything was in. That would be my flying the flag for Jeannie Kendall on that. The first special we did with her, episode 59, Jesus, Women in the Gospels.
So your next person.
Episode 66, Martin Fair. You mentioned golf earlier on. When I was told where he lived on the east coast of Scotland and in a little village called Carnoustie, which is one of the big top golf courses in the whole of the UK.
I have heard of it.
They have the Open there as well. I said, oh, please tell me you don't play golf because I'll be so annoyed. And he said, well, I do. He then told me a little story that he was a single handicap golfer, i.e., for those that know nothing about golf, really good.
Mm-hmm.
And he came out of a church meeting, fell over, and when he got, he was paralyzed down the right arm. And he then thought, no, I'm going to do something about this. So he then learned how to play golf one-handed. He's my age, and he's back to single handicap again, playing golf one-handed.
Wow.
That's not the reason why I selected him. It's what he did. You've already used the word facilitated, I think, earlier on. He facilitated the fact that where they were based, in a small little fishing village in Scotland, there was such a high area for taking drugs. They wanted to do something about it. And it's what they did and how he, instead of like some pastors think, well, I have to do everything. It's like, well, no, I don't have to do everything. Let's facilitate it. I'll tell you how we can do it, but I need all you guys as well. And this was as a result of a little old lady who would every week be praying every day to help these people out. And slowly but surely, one person came along and another, and he facilitated to make sure that they could make a drug rehab centre and get that to work through the village. And like a few years on, what happened? Well, the government heard about it and they were awarded a Queen's Medal for what they did and are doing in that little fishing village. So for me, it was so inspirational to say, do you know what? Anyone can do it. If Martin Fair and his church can do it, then so can we. So that's episode 66.
Wow. So the next one.
Kevin DeVries, episodes 98 and 99. I said earlier on about Noel Richards, what I really like, and you can tell just how good a guest is, and this has happened many times with well-known and not so well-known people, whereby the podcast is going really well. I've looked at the time, we've only got about 10 minutes left or whatever. I said, I'd love to take this on. Would that be okay? And instead of rushing me, he said, yeah, no, I've booked off the whole time. Just go for it.
Mm-hmm.
And Kevin DeVries was one of them. And the basis of the podcast was that he was made bankrupt. He was divorced not once, but twice.
Mm-hmm.
He had a terrible heart attack. But it's where he had that heart attack and what he was going to do as a result of it. So much so that they did a 20-minute documentary on him. And it's called The True Summit. It's on YouTube. It's a phenomenal, well-made documentary about what it's like to be a climber and just go and climb a mountain. Oh, let's call it Mount Everest, which it was. So you've got that story. But actually, it was then what happened subsequently and why he wants to get all the people that are feeling they want to know God but can't go to church. So he takes it to them and he takes it to microbreweries, which is a big thing now in America. He finally caught up with us. Well done.
Sure is.
People will feel safe to go to a microbrewery and meet and hear from Kevin DeVries about what he's shown about his life and learn more about Jesus and about the faith. So, yeah, episodes 98 and 99, Kevin DeVries, without a shadow of a doubt on that one.
Excellent.
Which then goes on to episode 116, which is with Christian Kreider. And he also is American, was a pastor, having gone to theological college. I think he was a Presbyterian, if I remember rightly. But all of a sudden, it's like, no, I want to give up this. And he and his wife then went all the way over to Austin in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And they were starting a church there. And then he thought, well, what can we do? How can we make some money for the church? So he went to the local brewery and said, I'd like you to make me beer. And they said, oh, I've heard these stories before. He said, no, really? I'll buy it off you, but this is what we want to do. And so he built up a relationship with the owner. And a couple of years later, having got a really good relationship, brewer phoned him up and said, I'm going to sell up. Why don't you buy it? Nowadays, if you go over there, they haven't got just one brewery, but they've got two breweries and two micro pubs, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, well, okay, that's great as far as I'm concerned, because as you know, I do like my beer. But it's why they're doing it. It's not just for the sake of making beer.
Right.
It's because, yet again, the people in the area know that's a safe place. They know they can go there every Sunday morning.
Yeah.
They know what it's like to go into a pub or a place that serves alcohol. They're used to that, and they go in there. Oh, there's a church going on.
Following in the steps of Martin Luther.
Exactly. Now, people forget that. And don't even get me going that Jesus used non-alcoholic wine. Come on.
That brings us to our ninth guest.
Yeah, Dave Mann, episode 129. I phoned him up when I'd been recommended, actually by the 10th person in a minute I'll share about. I spoke to him and left a message on his answer phone. He then phoned me back at 5:15 on a Saturday afternoon. I just listened to my football match, of which he, it turns out, is a fanatical West Ham fan in London. But it's actually when we came to do the podcast, what he had to share about being brought up in the inner East End of London and how now 67% of the population over there, well, you have to listen to the episode anyway, but he explains that obviously we've got so many of different ethnic origins now, and he also to be congregating his little area of Newham in East End of London. And it's what he does there, and it's what he has done with his wife and how they try and share the good news and how they just take that little extra step forward. It was so encouraging. So episode 129, Dave Mann.
Wow.
Hello, Dave, if you're listening, up the Ammers.
And the 10th.
Angie Barker, her name is. Now, her husband is Ash. That was a brilliant podcast, and it was Ash who actually recommended me to interview Dave Mann. But Angie then just took it on a step further, and she explained about why they had to give up everything. And her and Ash are originally from a little country just south of us called Australia. He says it with tongue in cheek. Very tiny, yeah. And how they then went over to Thailand, what they did in Thailand. And as they called it, they lived in the slums of Thailand because that's what they felt God wanted them to do. Not felt, but they knew. Mm-hmm. The fact that they met at a Tony Campolo conference and were helping it behind the scenes there, that obviously registered a lot with me because I've got such a lot of time for the late Tony Campolo and what he did in my life. And then Angie would then share more about stuff and how she would then, when she came to the UK and set up a United Reformed Church in Birmingham with her husband Ash, just so many stories there. It's like, wow, you really are getting your hands dirty, aren't you? You get your hands dirty for Christ here. For her to go to a death metal concert, that's worth listening to in itself, and how she met with the band afterwards and how in awe they were of what she was sharing. No, it's just brilliant. Now, if we spent less time criticizing others and the time you spend on social media to criticize others, instead of challenging yourself, say, well, what can I learn from this? Maybe we'd have a better world.
Absolutely. I agree with you, brother.
Thank you.
I agree. So that brings me to the next question, which is, what's your most challenging interview and why? It can't be all pie in the sky on the podcast.
I've sort of given reference to the Andy Robinson episode 41 with what happened subsequently. So that was very challenging and for me to put out in the first place. There have been 2 podcasts. One of them was supposedly a well-known evangelist. And I was promised by this person that they would use their own studio, get the best sound possible, all this sort of stuff. We'll really look after you. I sent the 5 questions over and off we went. And of course, she was doing it on a laptop in an open office. And I'm thinking, well, where's the studio that you promised? We'll keep going. Mm-hmm. And the 5 questions, she hadn't even bothered to look at them. And all the answers, it's like, well, who's your Christian hero? Well, anyone that I meet is a hero of mine. I mean, it was like she's been a politician here. It just got from bad to worse. She was a divorced person. I wanted to bring that subject in, and immediately I got cut down. And it's like, oh, why? She said, well, we're divorced now and blah, blah, blah. I said, well, okay, I'm sorry about that. What have you learned from it? And she just didn't want to share. Mm. And it's the only podcast after half an hour. I thought, do you know what? I'll say thank you, and left it. I handed it over to a couple of people in my team who support me as to, have I been stupid here? They listened to it. In my opinion, it's just rubbish. And that's why I'm not going to say who it is, because
right, yeah,
your lawyers be over me like a ton of hot bricks.
Protecting the innocent, right?
Yeah, me.
Yeah, that's cool. That brings me to another question, which is, what is the biggest lesson that you've learned so far doing this podcast?
Biggest lessons, I suppose, really. Mm-hmm. Certainly something that I had learned before doing the podcast, whereby try and help out others.
Yeah.
Steve, who organises all the servers for me and from his radio station, it's something we've been talking about ad nauseum, but that's always been his belief that, if you can help somebody, he would.
Yeah.
And so consequently, that's what I try to do. So if somebody needs something, I will do my best to help them out. Because, hey, I've got the skills and certain things, I can do it.
Yeah.
And to see Noel Richards reciprocate that to me, he didn't have to. So that taught me a lot about ego. What ego? Do we need an ego?
Yeah.
Well, I suppose it's always good to have a little bit of fun, isn't it? But yeah, so I learned a lot about that. But also, I think this year, Dave Mann, Angie Barker, Ash Barker, Christian Kreider, Kevin DeVries, they all have a similar ethos here. And it's that they're real. They're genuinely real. They're not afraid to wear their heart on their sleeve saying, I'm a Christian. But hey, look, I do this. It's not illegal to go to a pub and have a pint, and yet we make a big thing out of it.
Right.
Trying to get out there and get your hands dirty for Christ, I would say.
Yeah. And one thing I appreciate about your style of being a podcast interviewer is the fact that it isn't about you.
Isn't it?
Yeah, right. I listen to a lot of podcasts that the person who's running the podcast, they're interviewing someone but won't let them talk. They want to talk about themselves, or they want to talk and to a point where I want to learn from the person that you have on. I don't want to listen to your stories. I want to hear what this person is up to. And there's that fine balance of being a presenter and not asking enough questions or not interjecting enough, and taking over the podcast from the person that you're trying to interview. So I appreciate that about what you do.
Yeah.
Which brings us to just about our last question is this. Where do you see Off-Grid Christianity going in the future?
Obviously, I'd love to do a world tour.
Are you going to call it the Grand Tour?
Oh, that's good, isn't it? We could work on that. Don't think it's been done yet.
You just need to bring Jeremy Clarkson on the show.
That would be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, back into reality. Yeah, I don't honestly know, really. Every year I get the heebie-jeebies, and yet, we're 3 years through now on this, and for the first time in yonks, I can actually say, well, I've got a full order book of guests for the next 2 months ahead, and I've already got 5 podcasts that haven't gone out. That's a first for me. So I know I'm obviously doing something right, because the fact I can take July and August off, so I can just recuperate, because people don't realize just how long it takes to do a podcast like this. It might take 2 or 3 hours just to organize a podcast. And then you've got maybe 2 hours of the podcast itself. And then because I want my podcast to be as professional as sounding as possible, from about episode 30 onwards, 35 onwards, I then edit out as much of our ums and our ahs. Also, what doesn't work very well on radio is if somebody's thinking, yes, you can see that on TV because, they're thinking. So you're still engrossed. But in radio, doesn't work. Even if it's a pregnant pause, as we used to call it, of about 3 or 4 seconds, doesn't work. So I take all those out. So for every 10 minutes of podcast interview, it takes about an hour to edit out. And I can take up to like 2-3 days at times to do it because I want it to be professional.
Right.
So I've got that to do. I don't really know where it's going to go other than if God tells me, right, Martin, you've done it, I'd happily hang out the microphone. I've got other things to do.
Right.
But I don't think he has yet. And the reason why I say I don't think is because I keep asking. Every so often I'll just get a real downer on it. And then all of a sudden, whoosh. And I can't say how it is now, but I was feeling this for the past week and a half. Do I go back? And I was talking to Alison, my wife, about this. Maybe just give it all up. I'm really fed up. I was doing a Jonah, basically, sitting down under the tree. Let's just give up. I'm just fed up. Nothing's working. Let's just call it a day. I then, within a few hours, realizing that was bravado. It was ego, I suppose.
Yes. Yeah.
All of a sudden, somebody contacts me and he says, oh, by the way, the bloke says yes. It was a friend of his who's really, really well known, who's also slightly controversial at times. But hey, is he controversial or is he just making us think?
Yeah.
Hopefully we can get that over the line. And that was really encouraging. All these little things, I'm pretty sure is now, like God said, no, just keep going. Just keep going.
Right. And I knew that was a loaded question because just for conversation's sake, where do you see yourself in 5 years? It's very funny because when I was pastoring, I left my church in 2019. December of 2019 was my last service, thinking that I was going to go into 2020 in a new situation, in a new church. Obviously, COVID happened, the world shut down, and going back into church ministry, full-time church ministry, never really happened for me. And it kind of made me chuckle a little bit, and maybe I'm being facetious here. We have 2020 vision sermons pastors had ready for when it turned 2020. We're going to do this and we're going to do that. And we have 2020 vision. And then COVID came in and shut churches down and slammed the door and caused all kinds of havoc. In one fell swoop, all those plans were taken away, or the plans on how to do things were changed. And so, when you think about the future and you think about, well, I have my plan, but also God has his plan.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes things happen for good. Sometimes things happen that aren't so very good, but all of those things God can use to shape our future, that we can look back and go, before this situation happened, I wasn't prepared to help somebody out in that field. But now, 5 years later, I am. I didn't want to go through that. I didn't foresee me going through that. However, now I'm able to minister to a group of people that I wasn't able to minister before.
Exactly. And one of the podcasts that I've edited through the summer months, so that'll be going out in September, they have a real ministry to ministers. Now, we've heard all about this before, but one of the big points is that prior to COVID, some of the ministers thought they had to be all of it, instead of realizing that actually, no, you're supposed to be able to get other people. You're a facilitator, but it's control. Yeah. Some people like to have the control. They like to have the power. Whether you like it or not, in ministry, people sometimes like to have a power.
Mm-hmm.
And this person is saying, well, no, look at COVID. When COVID happened, so much good came out of that because the minister couldn't do anything. He could still do the sermons, but it was like, well, what can you do in your home? What can you do? There was this old saying, wasn't there, that if the Holy Spirit left the church would still carry on 95% as if nothing ever had happened, because that's how they've been indoctrinated. That's how the machinery runs. We had a classic opportunity in COVID for the ministers to let go and do what they're supposed to do, like the part of the body.
Right.
An arm can only do what an arm can do. And a minister should have been able to do the same thing. And unfortunately, what you're getting now, 5 years after COVID, are that some ministers are now picking back up all the drop things because they feel they need to do it. And it's like, no. Do you realise why you're burnt out? Because you weren't told you had to do all these things, and yet you feel you have to.
Right.
No, get the onus back on there.
Yeah.
Another podcast that went out, this person was really, really honest and shared about how he'd gone in his job as a Christian minister around various places in the world to encourage others. And when he got back, there was a letter on the table to say that his wife had left him. And he was really, I thought, humble about it and really explained a lot. And we had an email through a couple of weeks ago, and it was from the ex-wife saying, why don't you do a podcast with me, Martin? Because I can tell you what really happened. It's like, okay, no. No, I don't want to do that. But the fact she wrote in and we wrote back to say, thank you. Then she wrote back again to say some more stuff. And actually, she raised a really good point. And that is that people need to realize that in some ministers, you mentioned the word narcissistic, they can be narcissistic. Look at me. Consequently, she was saying that can be wrapped up into spirituality and I'm in charge. Despite everything that she's going through, she was able to realize that. Unfortunately, at the moment, she's gone the other side, now say she's an atheist. But that is a very good point that I hope with a future guest, we will be able to bring that conversation out.
That's amazing. Well, Martin, I have one more question for you as we wrap this up. It's been such a pleasure getting to see you, getting to talk to you.
You sound such a pastor. We pray for you.
Got to keep the donations coming in, brother.
That's it.
Tell me, what's the one thing that you're grateful for today?
I'm still married.
Yeah, it's a blessing, isn't it?
I didn't think you were going to ask a question like that. My wife is going to be listening to this. Yeah, we have been through hell and back. No two ways about it. I don't know how we have survived, maybe without God. Yes, I've always known that I can be a stubborn what's it. And stubborn can actually be good. Because I saw my parents get divorced, and I suppose didn't want to get divorced, and we hardly knew each other when we got married. And so despite all my faults, of which I've only got two, everything I do and everything I say, we're still together. And yes, I didn't realise that when I was a training officer, training people how to sail properly and give best advice, that what I wanted was to retire at 55 and go and play golf and have a nice house and everything else like that. And that's my wife keeps reminding me, everything you said as a training officer, you've actually got, but not in the way that you wanted. And I think, hey, God's shown me that you're going to have all those things, Martin, but actually, in order to get those things, this is what's going to happen. Would I still be a Christian? I don't know. I must probably still be arguing with God right now.
Right.
Yeah. That's a very humble question to ask. So thank you.
Yes. My friend, it's been a pleasure. God bless you. God bless Allison. God bless Sam. And hope to talk to you again very soon.
Thank you. And if God is a Bristol Rovers fan, I'm going to tell him off.
He's a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, so
let's go Steelers.
I can assure you that.
Thank you for having me. It's been great. Thank you so much.
Blessings.